Okay, today we'll talk about something related to the 12th of January, and maybe the subject is a little bit strange, but I learned that Stalin, apparently, the dictator, the Russian or the Soviet dictator, used for the first time his name Stalin. He used to have many pseudonyms in the past, but he chose to use Stalin on the 12th of January. And he kept it until the end of his life. And Stalin seems to mean the man of steel. That's because Stali without an N means steel in Russian. And this made me think of Eisenman, Peter Eisenman, who was not born on January 12th, but whose name is translated, in German or from German. If we add an N, just like in the case of Stalin, the man of iron or Iron Man. So I thought, let me think a little bit about this. On one hand, the man of steel, the steel man, and on the other hand, the Iron Man. And also today, in 2010, 13 years ago, it took place the terrible earthquake in Haiti, when approximately 160,000 people died. But first, let's see some images of Stalinist architecture, which we kind of know because we live in a country that knew communism. But like a quick aide-memoire, let's see a few images. And then I will show images of the earthquake in Haiti, and then architecture from Peter Eisenman. So we know Soviet architecture. It is an architecture that proclaims, symmetry, order, control, authority, and it's very persuasive in this sense. We have in Bucharest Casa Scântei, built in a similar way, not so tall, but still, proclaiming the above mentioned attributes. Here we see a monument dedicated to Stalin, which is inconceivable in Europe or in general in the world in the year 2023, maybe not totally inconceivable in, let's say, North Korea, maybe. But this kind of so-called, architecture for the people was not for the people at all. After all, at the top of this tower, we don't see the people. We see one man with an incredible scale. I mean, as architects, you can easily approximate the height of that immense statue. Anyway, so this is Stalinist architecture, apparently powerful, apparently, advocating order, and even I would hesitate to use the word serenity, because it's not really a serene architecture, but it's about comforting the masses that everything is under control. Obviously, not everything is under control, and we have the very proof not too far away from where we are at the war in Ukraine. I mean, if we oppose, in fact, I could have showed images of Ukraine now after it was bombed instead of the Haitian earthquake. But in one case, nature provoked the disaster. In the other case, man provoked that disaster. And again, someone emerging from communism. It's an architecture without glory, really. I mean, it's an architecture that depresses one with its falseness, because it is false, this sense of order. It was not order, it was dictatorship. It was dictatorship, and this is an imposed, it's a forced order. It's not a natural or organic order. Now, we see the project for the palace of the Soviets done by this architect, Yofan. I don't know the other two who they were, but we'll see 2 or 3 projects by Iofan, a man who served the regime very, very well. And we already saw actually an image of this, you know, it was the monument to one man, maybe Lenin, maybe Stalin, but all in all, this abstracted new pharaoh, you know, it's terrible. It's terrible because this is the apotheosis of Anthropocene, you know, the inflation of the human chest and the human body and the human being in the name of what? In the name of falseness. Now look at the Soviet Pavilion at the Paris Expo, 1937, the same architect, Boris Yofan. You know, at least here, I imagine there are two beings, like in, you know, the icon or the logo of the Russian or Soviet films, you know, with the man and the woman. Actually, a great sculptress, a woman, sculpted that. Here, what we see, I don't know. It was placed on top of that building, you know, showing the new man and the new woman, if they were indeed new. Another scene of, you know, Soviet or Sovietistic, I almost felt like say sorry about this salami thing. Here we see other pictures of Soviet architecture, all proclaiming order, stability, you know, confidence, and so on. But we know very well the misery that hid behind these buildings. We have an example, mega example in Romania too, no? So-called Casa Poporului. I don't know if you noticed, but that boulevard that goes into Casa Poporului has on both sides, you know, apartment buildings, and at the bottom, stores. Most of them are deserted, abandoned, some even vandalized. Why is it that that majestic boulevard has no active, you know, commerce there? You know, that why isn't there life in those stores? I think it's a good question. Not to speak about another good question. Why is it that right in front of Casa Poporului, there are homeless people living in unbelievable conditions, you know, even in you know, metallic containers that are meant for garbage, or right there in front of the majestic palace. And here we see another majestic palace, the palace of the you know, the victory of the people over you know, the arch enemy. But the arch enemy, you know, well, they were killed, they left the country, and I'm not glorifying them either. You know, it seems we replace one system with another. But actually, this building that you look at, I put it here intentionally because this is not in Soviet Union and it's not in Russia. It's actually in New York. You know, so there are some resemblances between, you know, Stalinist or Stalinistic architecture and capitalistic architecture. And you can see such things in Detroit as well, the capital of the T model by Monsieur Ford. This was been, I think, in Lithuania also during the time of Stalin. Of course, this is the subject of a, you know, possible PhD paper, you know, Stalinist architecture. And I imagine some people already wrote such papers. Anyway, but what do we see here? We see an architecture that loved symmetry, loved rigidity, loved control, and loved giving you the illusion that everything is fine. But life is much more complex, and it cannot be squeezed into the rigid framework of Stalinism. This kind of building is also you know, known to us because we have Casa Radio now in Bucharest, and you know, other so-called palaces built by you know, the the mega president who got shot in 1989. Anyway, socialist, I mean, Stalinist architecture, Stalinist architecture. But the bizarre thing is that Stalin apparently, when he was very young, was a child or a teenager, he wanted to become a priest and he wrote a lot of poetry. How do you explain it that this dictator, because of whom millions died, he actually wrote poetry and enjoyed poetry? This is to me incomprehensible.